the story of our boat in '86 is that's a great story. So we'll we kind of there's a lot of background to this, but from a strategic point of view, in rowing, just like in the Navy or anything else, you have somebody who's in charge of national rowing. And that man was a man called Chris Korzanowski, who we brought over from the Eastern Bloc, from Poland. He actually had gone through the Iron Curtain and he defected. And here he was coaching the US team. And his style of leadership was diametrically opposed to my natural style or Ken Dreyfus' style or the people who really helped us. It was, "You'll know, Dan, you suck." That was his style was incredibly negative. And it wasn't pleasant. I remember we were seat racing in '83. Now seat racing is mano mano in fours, 4-oared shells. So you would race a 4 against a 4, and then 1 4 wins by say a half a length, and the other 4's down. So 5-minute piece, 32 strokes a minute. So then at the end, you're exhausted, you're like this, and he says, pull the boats together. So you pull the boats together and you switch the 2 men. So you just switch across, and then you go and you get ready in that new combination, and then you race 5 minutes again at 32, exactly the same parameters. And now you win by a length. So the 2 man on one of the boats beat the other guy. So that's how we narrowed it down from about 200 people to 16. And it was just a series of tests. And so we were in Newport Beach, and I was going to race Kurt Balsbach. And Kurt was a big, strong guy. He was a nice man, and he liked to eat a lot of meatloaf, usually like every night, which got a little old after a while. But so me and him had matched up pretty well over the last year or so, and I knew this was going to be a tight race. And we started out that way. And it was bow to bow the entire time. It was absolutely dead even. When we finished the race, nobody knew who had won. And I mean, the coxswains didn't know, nobody knew. And the coach, Korzanowski, was over in his launch and he was making notes of the boat launch. And then I raised my hand and I said, "Who won that?" And he goes, "Are you kidding me? He killed you. He beat you by 1/10 of a second." Like, he killed me? For that, I wasn't going to make the team. You know,
how big of a distance are we talking? 1/10 of a second at cruise shell speeds?
That?
Oh, geez.
So, and it wasn't like it was a measured course, but yeah. It is what it is, you know, and that's what I thought at the time. You know, he was faster than me at that, but he wasn't going to be faster next time. And that is the attitude, and the attitude that I always had. Well, anyway, things went like that. We went to the Worlds. We did okay, and sometimes we didn't. So we get to '86, and '86 was also the Goodwill Games. You guys remember that? It was, you know, we were facing the Soviet Union. It was mano a mano, that kind of stuff. Well, the camp went to the Goodwill Games. The national camp was led by Korzanowski, and we did not. Because for various reasons, people got sick. I got hurt. I was out for 6 weeks, and then when I come back, they'd already selected everybody, and they were off. So I wound up going to Philadelphia and getting in with another group of basically rejects. A guy who was 34 years old, Bob Espeseth, and that's old in any sport, but in rowing as well, particularly. But he was a big man. He was about 6'6". He went about 225, and he was a beast. And he had been on 3 other Olympic teams before this. And so, but he'd gotten hurt and he hadn't rowed in a year, and he was just trying to get up to speed. The other guy was John Riley, who was another big guy, about 6'6", 220. And he was from Rhode Island, and he had a vicious Rhode Island accent, and was 21 years old and didn't know his butt from a hole in the ground, so to speak. But he was incredibly powerful and was an instinctual oarsman. And then the other guy was Ted Swinford, who was about 6'6", about 175, 180. So he was as skinny as I was, because I went about 172. And so that was the group. Big deal. Okay, there's oarsmen like that all over the world. What brought us together was the coach. and the coach was Ted Nash, and his protege was Ken Dreyfus. And so Ted's positive attitude and positive coaching had transmitted itself to Ken. And so his relentless positivity was transmitted on a daily, minute by minute basis. In fact, it didn't mean he wasn't critiquing, by the way. He was critiquing the crap out of us. He just was doing it in a way like this. Danny, tremendous power on the finish of that stroke. Unbelievable. Now, if you could just get that catch in a bit quicker, it will be awesome. And you're like, I'm great. And that's all you're thinking about. Oh, I better get the catch in. And so forth and so on. And it was just just every single minute he's coaching like that. And so what he got us to do was believe that we could win. First of all, the trial, because we had to go through a national trial in order to get to the Worlds, and then the Worlds. And there was never, ever a hint that we were not good enough, or that we didn't have what it meant to succeed, and that we weren't representing something noble and something that was worth winning. We were representing Penn Athletic Club, which is against the camp. And the camp is not wrong. They just got all of the assets. It was classic underdog mentality. And he was absolutely brilliant at engendering that. There was one morning, and I heard later that he did this with a couple of other crews of his. So it wasn't us. Just what he did. There was one morning, it was 5 a.m, and we were exhausted. We just rode for 10 straight practices or whatever, and everybody was wiped out. And this was down at the Schuylkill River at Penn AC. And we were on the locker room floor, just like this, and getting ready for practice. And he came up, bounding up the steps because his energy was infectious. Now, he had won the last gold medal in this particular event, which was the 4 without a coxswain, by the way, no coxswain with this boat. And in 1960, the United States had won the gold in Rome, and he had been in that boat. And so now it's 1980. So we hadn't won since then in either the Worlds or the Olympics. And so he literally comes bounding up the steps, and he's got this picture about this big, and he puts it on the locker room bench, and then he turns around and he races down the steps again. And so we're looking at the picture, and it's him, a picture of him and his 3 teammates on the gold medal stand in Rome. And they've all got these big Olympic gold medals around their necks, and they're just, you can almost hear the national anthem play. And it's black and white, and we're just looking at that picture. And about 10 minutes later, he comes bounding up the steps again, and he looks at us and he says, "That was one proud man that day, and that's going to be you. Let's go row." And you better believe that made an impression. Right. And about that. So every minute, we're giving it just a little more than everyone else, not because we were stronger, we weren't for the most part, but because we were more focused, we were more aligned around the same thing. And there was an immense pride. And in rowing, just like anything else, you just got to outlast the competition. You just got to take one more stroke than they do. And so that means you've got to endure one more moment of pain than they do. And so they used to measure our lactic acid and how much basically lactic acid was in your system. And that was a measure of pain. And they could tell you that. And what you were doing. And that's what did it. Now, if you can combine swing with the ability to endure pain, then you pretty much got a winning combination there. It's hard to beat that. So the US crew, meanwhile, had put together a pretty darn good 4, and they were very confident, and they went to the trial, and we killed them. We beat them by about 5 lengths, which is a long way. And the boat felt great, and we didn't even sprint. We didn't have to. We were swinging the entire time. And then we went out to San Diego, and we were rowing out there, and we had some of the most gorgeous practices. And it just kept getting better and better. We couldn't believe it, how well it was going. There was wakes from sailboats and Britain. They were really big boats, Jason. They went, and you know, monster crab, and we just went right through them like they didn't exist, just whoosh, and with the focus was 100% on what was going on in the boat. It was magical, and we went to the Worlds, and we had a great heat. Now, Robert Espeseth, the stroke man, the big old guy, was a brilliant tactician. And he and Ted had discussed some things, but Espy was also a little bit of a maverick. So he didn't always, unfortunately, share his plans with the rest of us, which could get annoying sometimes. But when he went over there, he knew everybody in the world rowing community. And so he was seen stroking this four, and he met some Canadians who were in the Canadian four of which had won the gold medal in Los Angeles in 84 and part of the 8. And so they said, Espy, we thought you retired. And he said, no, I did. I actually did. And I'm just over here on a lark, and the real stroke is hurt, and I'm just filling in until he gets better. So like, oh, and so they all laughed and had a good time until we saw them on the line at the heat. And they're like, what are you doing? I said, don't worry about us. So we won the heat pretty handily. And then we go into the semifinal. And the semifinal had East Germany in it and West Germany. And the East Germans had won 10 times in a row this event, 10 out of 11. And the West Germans had actually beaten them earlier in the year. So these were some pretty good crews in the semi. It was rough water going down the course. And I had gotten sick. So I had walking pneumonia in there. And they, things can get pretty brutal in any sport. And so we had a meeting, and they had a spare. And the spare was a 6'8" guy from Brown, who was an amazing guy. But we tried him out, and it just didn't work, swing-wise, of course, because he hadn't gone through everything we had. So they said, okay, if we keep Dan in the boat sick, that's better than anybody else in the boat healthy. Not because I'm a stud, but because together we were
synced up with those guys.
Yeah. And that was it. So that's it. So semifinal, Espy decided he wasn't going to tell us this, but when we got to the 1,000-meter mark and we were length ahead of the field, all of a sudden he just took it down. So took the rating down, which means we went from 36 strokes a minute in the tailwind, which is a pretty low rating in the tailwind. We were still ahead, to about 34. And the West Germans came up on us right away, because as soon as you do that, you give up a couple of seconds. And then the East Germans started coming on us. And then everybody started moving, and he's looking around, and we're like, Espy, what are you doing? Espy. And Riley, who's the Rhode Island guy, said, I can't believe it. What are you doing? And we're talking in the boat, which is highly unusual, the ability to do that. And the boat was swinging, but he took it down again. And so now we're at 32, and everybody goes by us except, we were in third. And then he just rode that way. We rode that way all the way through, and we finished third. And we're like, what the hell was that all about? And he's like, well, you'll see in the final. But I think we gave them exactly the impression that they need to see. And like, what the heck you're talking about? But we did have a little talk prior to the final. So when we went out there, now I'm sicker and I feel pretty
Dan,
bad.
I just got to say, that is a level of gamesmanship that I was not aware occurred in those things.
Oh yeah. I
had no idea.
It doesn't normally occur because you don't normally have those type of options that we had in that boat. You don't have somebody like Espeseth in there who had been on pretty much every team since God created the sport. He'd been out there. So I'm not saying God created the sport, by the way. It just sort of happened to flow from a natural affinity for water. But so we got out, and there's a great video of this race. It's one of the sort of all-time great videos, I think, for the sport, but for anything. And so the announcer, who were two English guys, one of whom I met later when I went to Oxford, he was a Cambridge guy. And they're calling it the whole time like this. First of all, they're not even mentioning us. You know, we get out to a lead of about half a length, and they're like, well, you know, the West Germans have a great crew this year, and the Italians are all awesome. They won the other semi, and they're talking about, but the United States is still in the lead. But I'm sure things are going to change in the next 500 meters or so. And so we're just holding it down. You can see the West Germans looking over their shoulder because they're pretty sure any minute now we're going to crack as we go through the 1,000. And I have to tell you, when we went through the 1,000-meter mark, I felt like cracking because I had nothing at that point. And as we went through, I'm like, okay, I remember thinking one stroke at a time, just take the next stroke. And then we'll see what happens. And that hurt a lot. And then we'll go one more stroke. And I was the person who was calling the race plan. So I was the person who had to respond to what was going on outside of the boat. I was, you know, looking around and trying to figure it out. And I just wanted to die. And when we got to the sprint was supposed to go at 400 meters to go in the 2,000-meter race. But I saw the West Germans beginning to move with about 650 to go. And I didn't want to call it because as soon as you call a sprint, you go up and it's, you know, it
pain time.
It's pain time. And so, but I did, and they came up and I'm like, go now. And they didn't hesitate. And we went right up. And so now we're at 38, 39 strokes a minute. And the announcers are like, the United States is still in the lead. They're still in the lead, and the West Germans were cutting us down every single stroke, and that's the way it was in the boat. So then we went up again with about 250 to go. So now we're about 42, and then we went finally to about 45, coming to the finish. And the West Germans came up, and it came down to the last stroke. And actually, if you look at the video, I had nothing on the last stroke at all. Last two strokes were there was no puddle coming out. And they came and we beat them by less than 1/10 of a second. So it was probably about that much.
You killed him.
Even Korzanowski thought it was close. So, and you could see them just looking over unbelievably because SB had it right. He knew exactly what was going to happen. But the person who set it up was Ted Nash. He's the person who had given us that belief that when we went out there, we were going to win. I have one more little note from that, because the day before the final, we were rowing up the course, and the US8 was pulled over in front of us. And they had finished first in the heat. They'd finished first in the semi. They were favored to win the final. And remember, we had finished second or third in the semi, and nobody knew what was going to happen with us. And Ted was riding his bicycle alongside, coaching us from the bank, which, you know, they had to do. And we heard Korzanowski's voice ahead of us. And he was saying, "This is worst date I ever coach in life. No way, you suck." And he was just going, and as we passed, every head in it was down like this. And Ted picked up his megaphone and he said, "Ben, you look fabulous. Tomorrow you'll be world champion." And every head in the 8 went, and look at us as we went by. And I'm like, I don't care where the heck we finish. I am just so proud and happy to be with this group at this moment. Didn't matter. You know, if we hadn't won, it was just the effort that was required to do that. That entire experience was monumental. And that's what I'll remember.